Welcome back for Hunter x Hunter Chapter 414 talk. This week, I think I can guess which part of the chapter everyone is excited to talk about, so rather than stringing you along, I'm gonna skip to the end and talk about the reintroduction of Gon and Killua into the story. I mean, if I did make you wait, you wouldn't really be paying attention. You'd be spending the whole time thinking, yeah, get to the Gon and Killua stuff. So, I'm getting to it, okay? First off, I call it a reintroduction, even though they've technically popped up already in the story arc. We had Gon's appearance back in chapter 345, and Kurapika remembered Killua's advice about Bisky during this conversation in chapter 350. The obvious difference is that here in chapter 414, Kurapika is actually proposing a role for Gon and Killua to play in the Succession War, namely the very important role of finding and protecting Prince Wobble. They've been tied into the main plot now, and I have to confess at this point that I did not see this coming. For years, I've been one of those guys saying that Gon has no business in the Succession War, you know? This is a very tangled web that a character like Kurapika is better equipped to unravel. Gon belongs right where he is on Whale Island, reflecting on how he lost his Nen and the end of his quest to find Jing. And Killua belongs where he is with his sister Alika, enjoying their newfound freedom together. She's been freed from the Zoldyck Mansion, he's freed himself from Illumi's influence. They deserve this chance to just enjoy life. The election arc brought Gon and Killua's adventure together to a satisfying conclusion, and while they could have new adventures ahead of them sometime in the future, I was pretty sure they would be out of the spotlight for at least the duration of the Succession War, if not longer. So, as a certified Gon and Killua doubter, if you want to call me that, I now have to try and guess how much of the spotlight they're going to get, now that they've been looped into the Black Whale story. And you can appreciate the difficulty of my position. If I try to downplay it and say they won't have too big of a role, my prejudice will be obvious to everyone. Look at the doubter, he's still doubting. What a fool. Therefore, I'm going to start out with what I call the boys are back position, which is the strong form of the argument that Gon and Killua are going to be main characters again starting now, and they'll be playing a big role in the plot. We're going to go whole hog, hold nothing back, and then, when we've indulged this fantasy to its utmost, then maybe we'll pull back a little, take a more moderate position. But right now, there is no pulling back because the boys are back. They're back in town again. Got it? Good. Since the boys are back, that means that this quest Kurapika proposes to set them on to find Oito's little sister, and 14th Prince Wobble, is not a wild goose chase. Nasubi did not intercept the baby swap, as I theorized previously, and Wobble is not still on board the Black Whale. Gon and Killua will reunite, they'll send the coded message to the post office according to Kurapika's instructions, and they'll find out where to go. And, you guessed it, it's gonna be Meteor City. After all, that's where Gyro was headed, and we know that Gon has to meet Gyro at some point, according to this page from chapter 204. If the boys are back, that means it's time for the Gyro arc we've been expecting, ever since this chapter was released, 23 years ago, in the year 2003. And, less importantly than that, Meteor City does make sense as a destination for a refugee. Oito's sister naturally wants to go off the grid, because the Kekken government probably wants to execute her, and maybe even execute this baby for deserting from the Succession War. This right here is a city full of people who legally do not exist, and who are considered untouchable by the rest of the world, as we discovered back in the Yorknew arc, when the Mafia looked into the spiders. That makes Meteor City an obvious hiding spot. Although when I put it that way, it's such an obvious choice that keeping it a secret from Oito was kind of pointless, wasn't it? Oito could easily guess, yeah, I bet my sister went to that off-grid city where the government can't chase you. You know, the only one like that in the entire world. But I digress. The boys are back, so once they find Wobble and her aunt hiding in Meteor City, it'll be on them to protect the young prince from Beyond's curse. As Kurapika says, their mission will be to protect her and attempt an exorcism. Now at this point you might be tempted to say, easy, get Nanaka to do it. But I don't think that's where this is going at all. And here I have to throw in a quick Nanaka tangent. Yes, Killua did have the special ability to give Nanaka orders and get his wishes granted without paying the price. But in chapter 336, he says Nanaka was only granting those wishes to get his praise. Now he's promised to praise her whenever she wants, and he's told her that she doesn't have to grant wishes anymore. He doesn't want to be the kind of big brother who emotionally manipulates his sister into giving out free wishes. Then he wouldn't be much better than Illumi. I think all the Reddit arguments about how Nanaka will break the story because she could end the Succession War in an instant, and if she doesn't do it, then it's a plot hole. That whole line of reasoning stems from not remembering this very important conversation. Killua is not going to use his sister as a wish dispenser anymore, okay? That's not what their relationship is going to be, because he wants to be a good brother. So when she's not used this way, it's not a plot hole. They didn't forget that they have infinite wishes to spend on whatever they want. You are the one who forgot about this very important character moment. Sorry if I sound frustrated. I've actually wanted to make a video on this exact topic for a while because it seems like such a common misunderstanding. But life has gotten in the way, you know how it is. Maybe I'll put that video script back on top of the pile. Anyway, we don't need Nanako to do the exorcism. There's an option that makes even more sense, and she's right here in Meteor City. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Hina the Chimera Ant, formerly a squad captain under Liol. As we all know, she's the one who exercised Knuckles' ability APR from Cheetu, although she didn't like the way it made her look afterwards. As the Chimera Ant arc ended, we saw Hina in the company of Welfin and Bizeff. Welfin is sure that Gyro would head to Meteor City, so these three are going there to join up with him. By the present day in our story, they've no doubt found him already and joined his fledgling organization. And right here is the connective tissue between the Wobble mission and the Gyro arc. Gyro has the exorcist that Gon and Killua need to save Wobble. Maybe the boys will ask around about an exorcist and they'll learn that Gyro's organization has one, or maybe they'll be forced to work with Gyro's information network first in order to find Wobble at all, in which case Gyro could use Hina as leverage later once he knows what they're trying to do. The exact details matter less than the fact that he's got something they need. So however Gon and Killua first become aware of Gyro, they will have to make some kind of deal with him in order to accomplish their mission. What that deal entails could be anything. Gyro could set them off on a whole new mission of his, obviously Welfin would come along, yada yada, and at some point they would realize that they're working for a pretty bad guy. So, of course, Gon will want to change Gyro's mind and get him to stop being a bad guy, by talking things out with him, probably, given that Gon's not a Nen user anymore. It seems like talking wouldn't work, but I don't know. Gyro's never had to argue with Gon freaks before. He might not be ready for what he's up against here. And this whole story shall constitute the long-awaited Gyro arc, and the boys, who are back, will end up saving all of Meteor City in addition to saving Wobble. And Bizeff will be there, and it'll be amazing. Okay, that was the boys are back position, and we all agree it's beautiful. I mean, it puts Welfin back in the story. I love Welfin. But now we should raise a few objections just on the off chance that we've overdone it a little on the hype. My first objection is that I still really like the idea of Wobble being on the Black Whale. To me, it makes sense that Nasubi would spy on Oito and keep track of his youngest daughter Wobble in the months between the Sea Urn ceremony and the Black Whale's departure. He was probably keeping tabs on all the younger princes who had very good reasons to try and escape the war. It seems like this sort of surveillance would be within Nasubi's power, and it just makes sense because he's got all these sarcophagi to fill up. A runaway compromising the succession war after all this planning would be catastrophic, and Nasubi didn't win his own succession war by being bad at planning. Now obviously if Wobble is on the boat, then Gon and Killua are on a wild goose chase. Maybe they'll end up finding Oito's sister hiding out in Meteor City, and she'll tell them the story of how Nasubi grabbed the baby from her before she got 2 blocks from the hotel. They could then relay that info to Kurapika, and at that point, their part in the war would be pretty much finished. Although they'd at least have made it to Meteor City, so that could still be a lead-in to a future Gyro arc. My second objection is a bit more meta, and it's really just that the Succession War, as a storyline, is already quite full. Doesn't exactly need a whole new subplot, new main characters with their own point of view. I mean, I can't say that it wouldn't fit. Togashi can write whatever he wants, but quite a lot is going on right now. Do I have to enumerate? We've got all the princes who are all in unique situations in the war. We've got Mafia families working with the spiders. We've got the spiders fighting Hisoka. We've got Krollo's treasure hunt. We've got the silent majority murder mystery. We've got Sudanka's quest for autograph paper. We've got Steiner and the Justice Bureau. We've got Borkson navigating life as a new member of the High Lee family. I can definitely keep going, but all of this stuff is important. We have to trace all of these interwoven threads to understand what's happening. And we're right in the midst of special martial law at the moment, so we can guess that there's going to be a lot of fights as well. And where there's a fight, there's a big text bubble explaining a complicated new Nen ability, as we're already seeing with Chiyamashi here. Now, you could argue that after the special martial law is resolved, whenever that is, there might be a bit of a lull in the Succession War as everyone gets used to the new status quo. And that could be a good time to cut away to Gon and Killua's adventure. Maybe it would serve as a modest interlude, sort of like how the Chimera Ant arc cut away to the spiders fighting Zazen for a few chapters. But if we go by that analogy, the interlude should not be deeply connected to the main action of the story. Zazen certainly wasn't a big part of the Chimera Ant arc, she was strictly a side quest. It was more about checking in on the spiders. If Gon and Killua's interlude is mostly about checking in on them, and maybe moving them to Meteor City at the same time, then we should not expect them to play a critical part in saving Prince Wobble. Saving Wobble is undoubtedly main story business, and that's really the thrust of my third and final objection. It shouldn't be Gon and Killua's role to come in and save Oito's daughter. That's Kurapika's job. In my very first Hunter x Hunter video, I talked about Kurapika's inner conflict and how it's all setting up a choice that he'll eventually have to make. Will he prioritize his original mission to recover the eyes of the Kurta, or will he prioritize saving the innocent life of Prince Wobble? Togashi has never let us forget about this conflict. Oito hesitates to trust Kurapika because he's got a different objective and she's not sure what he'd do if he ever had to pick between them. Bill doesn't want to team up with him at first because he's got a different objective and he's not sure what he'd do if he ever had to pick between them. And right here in chapter 414, Bill proves he's a good judge of character, saying that Kurapika's the type to carry out his mission no matter what, a trait that he specifically calls out as villain-like. On this subject, he is in complete agreement with Melody, who once thought that Kurapika's heartbeat was as sickening as Crollo's. Everyone who gets close to Kurapika is screaming at us that his dark determination is frightening to them, and they don't know what he's capable of when his mission's on the line. So, how does all of this pay off if Kurapika never has to make a choice? If Wobble is saved by Gon and Killua without any hard decisions or sacrifices, well, good news I guess. We never had to find out what Kurapika would do if he had to pick between them. Now he can move on to his original objective without ever resolving that conflict we were building up. I simply do not believe things will be that easy or that boring. Responsibility for Wobble's safety has to rest with Kurapika, and it has to burden him with a decision about what matters most. If he just tells his friends to take care of it and then they do, we've cheated him out of his main conflict. Now, some of you may object that Kurapika will still have this conflict. He's not going to be cheated. It'll just be about protecting Wobble's cousin here instead. After all, a baby's a baby. He's still an innocent life in danger, so what difference does it make? Well, I think the fact that this boy's not in the war makes a pretty big difference actually, because he's an innocent life in a lot less danger than Wobble is. Since it can be proven by physical inspection that he's not Prince Wobble, the other princes have no need to kill him. And since it can't be definitively proven that Wobble has left the war, Oito's family can't be punished, and so this baby isn't even in legal trouble for now. The most pressing threat to his life is the idea that a Beyond Curse targeted him back in chapter 358, in this panel we've talked so much about, and I don't think this is likely at all. To be fair, we're still very much in the dark about Beyond's curse and how it works, or maybe even what it does. This is something I really emphasized in last week's video. But what could Beyond have done while in custody to put a new curse on this baby that he can't see, who has not done the Cedern ritual, and who hasn't even attended the departure ceremony yet because that happens in the next chapter? I cannot imagine how Beyond could have done it manually, or what sort of automatic conditions could have been fulfilled by the cousin baby at this moment. And there's no way he's a curse baby himself because, come on guys, Kurapika has checked him out with Gyo at some point. It'd be insane not to. So, I think it's way more likely that this was Silent Majority's work, and there's no curse on this baby. Which means that nothing and no one is really trying to kill him. And if nothing's trying to kill him, Kurapika's not really going to have to try that hard to protect him, and so the conflict we want never arrives. The real Wobble is in much more danger, and saving her presents a much bigger challenge, especially if Kurapika's worst case scenario is true, and she's both on the boat and targeted by a curse. So, what does this mean for Gon and Killua? It means I don't want to give them Wobble, or a central part in saving her. So, they're probably limited to the scenario I described earlier. Finding Oito's sister, hearing the story about Wobble being taken from her, and informing Kurapika about it. I could imagine them finding Wobble but being unable to exercise the curse, so the responsibility for saving her is on Kurapika, and he's got to deal with the curse babies directly, but that's a half measure. If Kurapika's the one who has to save her, she should just be on the boat. I want the worst case scenario. I want the real Wobble on board the Black Whale. It's more elegant, it makes more sense to me, and it opens up the possibility that I talked about a couple weeks ago, which is that Nasubi could have secretly involved her in the departure ceremony to make her eligible, and then hidden her away somewhere. In that case, she does have a guardian spirit beast, which could reveal itself as a curveball late in the war. To me, that possibility, and all the possibilities opened up by Wobble being on the boat, are much more exciting than the boys are back scenario. So, with my apologies to the boys, I'm both hoping and predicting that they're not given a very big role to play. Now there's also the extreme doubter position to consider, which is that Kurapika will find out Wobble's on the boat immediately somehow, and thus never even make contact with the boys. In that case, we would get nothing. No boys are back, no brief interlude, and no setup for Gyro and Meteor City. If Togashi is really that much of a tease, I mean, I'll think it's kinda funny, but I think 99% of his readers would feel rather differently about it. Look, I don't think he's going to do that to you. You'll get something. At minimum, I'm sure they'll talk to each other on the phone and make plans to meet up. And that promise of a future reunion will tide you over in the years to come. Okay, I feel like I've made an entire video here on the Gon and Killua situation, but the video's not over yet because there's the whole rest of the chapter to talk about. Let's dive in. First thing I want to bring up is my prediction from last week that Halkenburg shot at Luzurus after thinking that a different arrow was already flying at Benjamin. I was pretty confident about the Benjamin thing since the hand position was unambiguous, but there was no direct evidence at all for Luzurus being the target instead. It was just the best idea I could come up with, and I thought I made a decent case for it. Now, I'm actually feeling way more confident in that theory, because Luzurus is acting very weird right out of the gate. Here's my litany of suspicion. First, there's this guy Rice, who I said might have been swapped with a Halkenburg supporter during the Shikaku incident. He's the one who decides to inform the prince immediately about Yushihi and Chiamashi. This gives Luzurus, who Basho believes to be asleep, a natural-seeming opportunity to start giving orders about the special martial law. If Luzurus has been swapped out, and the Hulk supporter in there wants to start prepping for SML as soon as possible, he needs this excuse to start taking action, and it's conspicuous that Rice is the one to provide it. Then, after giving all the orders, he calls Rice over to him for some kind of private conference. Why do these two need to conspire in private unless they've both been swapped and need to coordinate on the new details of Halkenburg's plan? I think this stuff with Rice is compelling on its own, but I've got more. Being awake when Basho thought he was asleep is already weird. If nothing fishy is going on, it's a super lucky coincidence for him that he woke up just in time to give all these important orders. And almost the first thing out of his mouth is a request for water, which gets his own close-up panel. If this is really Luzurus, it's a meaningless request that doesn't deserve this much attention. But if it's not Luzurus, it makes perfect sense. If you're a non-smoker and you swap into Luzurus' body, you're not going to be used to how a heavy smoker's mouth feels, and some water would probably help a lot. Now let's look at the orders he's so ready to give. Though he's apparently never discussed this contingency with his personal guards before, he's instantly sure that SML is beginning. He's guessed correctly that Ben will knock together a story about a terrorist attack, he's correctly ordering a policy of non-resistance, and he correctly believes that Ben's soldiers will be ordered not to attack Hunter Association members. He's not making a bunch of guesses in a panic here, all of these orders are flowing out of him with no hesitation. His preparation seems incredible. And if it's just because of forethought, why didn't he tell his guards in advance, so they'd know what to do if it started while he was asleep or something? It doesn't make sense. And finally, there's the order to destroy the drugs. Our boy Basho immediately thinks this is off, because what they're smoking is legal. This Mohawk guy counters that under SML, that won't be a defense. But Basho logically points out that under SML, Ben can just execute anyone he wants without any pretext. Mohawk guy has to tell him to shut up and stop thinking about how weird the order is, which is a good reason for us to focus on it. A Halkenburg follower probably wouldn't know that these are legal drugs, and he'd assume that a druggie would get rid of his stash ahead of a raid. Whoever's in Luzurus' body, he's doing what he imagines Luzurus would do because he doesn't know the real situation. Basho has instantly picked up on this detail and gotten suspicious. I think we should follow his example and be very suspicious that Luzurus isn't Luzurus. Even if it didn't confirm my guess from last week, which it does, this scene just stinks to high heaven. Now, if Luzurus has been swapped, it's natural to wonder whether it's Prince Halkenburg himself who's in there. Yeah, it's only a 1 in 14 chance, but we have to admit it's more exciting if it's Halkenburg. And it solves the problem of his time limit for controlling Balsamico. If Luzurus has swapped with Halkenburg, then Luzurus has now been swapped into Balsamico's body. And if that body is kept alive and restrained, then Halkenburg has free reign in Luzurus' body indefinitely, and he can finally get a good night's sleep at some point. He must be exhausted. But how can we justify Halkenburg high-rolling the 1 in 14 to achieve this dramatically desirable outcome? Well, I've thought about this hypothesis he wanted to test, and here's an idea. What if he's testing what happens when his group contains a body with 2 souls in it already? His hypothesis could have been that the overcrowded body will take priority, and thus the active soul in there, namely his own, will be selected as the swapper. For the record, I am not confident at all in this idea, and it might just be a random follower who's been swapped into Luzurus. But I offer it as a possible justification for how much fun it would be if we've got Halkenburg in Luzurus. Hulkzurus, Lusenberg, I don't know. Whatever we called him, it'd be a good time. And it would mean the stakes are even higher when Melody and Kaiser try their assassination plan. The only other thing I want to touch on in 10:07 is that we're seeing the first test of Benjamin's orders, the ones I put a big question mark next to last week. Rage is sent to keep Kanji Dole busy because Rage is from the Hunter Association, but there's immediately a confrontation, and it seems like Kanji Dole prioritizes self-defense over the order to leave hunters alone. We can probably expect this pattern to be repeated, so there's bound to be some fighting in store for characters like Bisky, Hanzo, and Izunavi. As for Babimaina in room 1014, well, he's proven to have more discretion than most of the Ben boys, and there's no non-association guards in the room for him to try and execute. He should be able to facilitate a peaceful surrender if he makes it look like Kurapika's best option. Now, moving on to room 1009, I want to highlight that there is at least one person in the room. Yushihi did say he doesn't like to extend his end very far, so that's one person minimum. Maybe there's more. I got called out by a lot of you in the comments last week for saying Halkenburg's group was in 1009. Many people said they believed he was in the Justice Bureau on Tier 2, and they cited this map given at the end of the chapter, where nobody's shown in 1009 at all. But I was there, fighting for my life in the comments section, saying that this map does not show the complete picture. There's some fog of war based on what Ben does and doesn't know. Even one person being in 1009 confirms that this is true. The map wasn't comprehensive. It still seems likely to me that Halkenburg was in 1009, because Ben felt the rumbling and instantly assumed there were enemies in that specific room. I surmise that he can judge what direction the rumbling is coming from. If Hulk shot from Tier 2, we'd expect Ben to feel the rumbling from somewhere below him, and he wouldn't have ordered his men straight to 1009. And it's notable that if Luzurus has been shot, Hulk must have shot him from somewhere on Tier 1, because we see him preparing to shoot straight in front of him, not up into the ceiling. So, I do think Luzurus was shot, I do think Hulk was on Tier 1 when he did it, and it makes the most sense for him to have done it from room 1009, just like Benjamin thought. There could be only a single person left in the room, because the rest of them escaped already. After all, Ben's orders weren't carried out at once because he started coughing. Or Yushihi's timid N stopped after encountering one person, and they're actually all still in there, getting ready to shoot again. This would surprise me a bit, as I assume Halkenburg's gotta wait a while between shots, so I like the idea that he's escaped. Or his followers have escaped because he's in Luzurus. But if he's not in Luzurus, and if he can shoot another arrow this fast, then we could see an invincible Yushihi getting possessed and then killing Chiyamashi before dying of his own wounds. It was conspicuously established that symbiotic type attacks are not blockable, and this would be a very ironic death for Chiyamashi, turning his powerful support ability against him. That sounds pretty fun, and since they're waiting for the SML declaration before going in, that means there's been 15 minutes for Halkenburg to recover. So sure, let's say he can shoot another arrow by then. And all we've got left is the lengthy conversation in 1014, in which Kurapika expounds upon every conceivable permutation of baby location and curse status, and everything they'd need to do in response to each permutation. If I go over all of it again, you're gonna get bored, so I'm not going to. I trust that you've read all of this carefully, and I've already said my hope is for the worst case scenario to obtain. Woble's on board the Black Whale, and she's the target of a Beyond Curse. All the other options are less interesting because they'd make it easier to protect Woble. Leaving that aside, let's talk about Bill's idea of negotiating with Beyond, and offering him an official pardon in exchange for details about the curse. So if it were anyone else, I'd be raising my eyebrows here. Giving Beyond his freedom at any time sounds like a recipe for disaster, even if they stipulate that he stays in prison until they reach the new continent. Maybe Bill is really suggesting it because he's loyal to Beyond, and this is his plan to free him. But Bill is not anyone else. Bill is Bill. And in my view, he's proven himself to be a solid guy. He stuck with Kurapika and Oito when all his buddies were killed or arrested, sure. But the bigger deal to me is that he let Kurapika give out information on his Nen ability to all of Tier 1 via the Nen class. This has turned him into a complete sitting duck as a guard in the war. Really think about what a massive disadvantage he's at now. No one has to be worried about getting into his range, no one has to be worried that he might be a counteractive type. They all know he's got a support ability. So he's really put himself in a shocking amount of danger here, when he could have simply told Kurapika no, or walked away from the war entirely. I don't think a paycheck from Pariston or Beyond is enough to explain that. So I believe him when he says he's done with Beyond, and I believe he's sincere about protecting Woble, and protecting all the lower princes, if possible, by stopping the war or running down the clock. And since I trust Bill, I don't think this idea of his about using Longi's Moonlight Act on Beyond is a trick either. I think it's just a pretty good idea. But there's one aspect of the plan that Bill doesn't seem to have considered. Kurapika will only have access to Moonlight Act if he's fulfilled Longi's condition of identifying the Beyond Baby. And if Kurapika knows who the Beyond Baby is, And it's Serednik, as I believe. He will naturally want to work Serednik into any contract he makes with Beyond. That knowledge gives him something to offer Beyond besides a pardon. For example, he could say, I won't expose that Serednik is your son. Or he could say, I'll assist your son Serednik in the war for the next week. Beyond obviously wants his child to win, probably even more than he wants a pardon from the Hunter Association. And Kurapika would finally get a chance to scout out Serednik. After all, getting to Serednik was his reason for joining the Zodiacs and getting on the boat, and he's got zero intel on him after 2 weeks. Maybe it won't be an alliance, but a one-time, one-on-one Nen class. That could make some sense because Serednik's so curious about Nen, but whatever it is, you get my point. Beyond stands to gain from anything that helps Serednik, and Kurapika is desperate to meet Serednik, so it's the perfect offer to make. And just from a story perspective, it'd be nice to have an excuse for these two to interact a little, and size each other up sometime before the Succession War is ending. It's not so dramatic if they're still complete strangers to each other when the showdown happens, is it? But, of course, Kurapika doesn't know the identity of the Beyond baby yet, and none of this can happen until he does. And that's gonna be all from me. I know the videos are getting a little longer. It's not my fault. There's been a lot to discuss in these chapters, a lot of big picture stuff to consider. I'm not padding the video out, for example, by reading Chiyamashi's ability description and then telling you the plot to the novel Lord of the Flies for some important context. But seriously, these chapters are dense, and that's how I like it. I am loving this batch of chapters so far. Even if everyone in the comments makes fun of me for being a Gon and Killua doubter, it won't wipe the smile off my face. Togashi's just making me too happy right now. Getting things wrong is part of the fun for me, as I've said before, and this is no exception. So thank you all once again for watching. Keep those fingers crossed for this guy to survive martial law, and I'll see you next time.